My thought is on Pulse, is in listening to some of the prior videos that Richard uploaded, it's not that Ethereum is necessarily a direct competitor to Pulse, right? Pulse is we are out for onboarding those individuals that are mostly on Ethereum that haven't converted. So I'm thinking if we get 10% of ETH holders on chain, unless my math is wrong, and I've probably done it 100 times, I think if we get 10%, that puts us around 2-cent Pulse.
I would say that Pulsechain almost has as many active wallets as Ethereum right now. So then you figuring out wallets to growth and price isn't necessarily going to do us any good. And this is where you have to try to debate the idea of Metcalfe's law versus money in the bank, right? So why did Shiba go up, right? Well, there was some wallets, but it was because FTX pumped it. They had the money in the bank. They were pushing it. So, and some big wallets, big money, right? Venture capitalists who created it. So I guess if we could come up with a better metric like money moving in, or that probably would help us. But yeah, activity is good because the whales like to see large numbers. So, but everybody personally, if you're not using 10 wallets on Pulsechain, okay, that's weird. So if we have 300,000, it's just like Ethereum though, you use a lot of wallets there too. So if you want to think 300,000 wallets is people, no, there's bots running nonstop. So it's really it. But then again, you have to think about banks. Banks, well, they've got multiple accounts per person, and they just attribute it as people, basically. Like, oh, we have 100 million accounts, 100 million people, but it's not true, right? They maybe have 20 million. Maybe they even have less if they make fake ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Hex is the way, but I think there is value in making a distinction between active wallets and active addresses. Although saying that doesn't make much sense, but I feel like I've read something. But regardless, maybe it would be maybe a better metric to track would just be like daily volume. So I mean, looking at Dex Screener right now, Pulsechain's like almost 15 million, and Ethereum is 770 million. So I mean, if those numbers are accurate enough for us to base some kind of prediction of future performance of Pulsechain and adoption, 10% of 770 million would be 77 million, right? So that would be 6x or something, where it's 14, 15 millions, 4x, something like that, right? Whatever that is. And we're not in full-blown bull run yet, right? I mean, what is the total market cap sitting at? Does anybody know off the top of their head? I can look it up, but I mean, what are we at, like 1.5 trillion? This is for crypto.
Yeah, something like that. Right around a trillion.
1.1. Yeah, 1.1-ish.
1.1, and people speculate that. I mean, the last market we got, the last cycle rather, we got just over 2. And I know there are people out there that are thinking we're going to 3, and there are people out there that are thinking we're going to 10. So I mean, if we split the difference and say we're going to, I don't know, 6.
Didn't we break 3 trillion at the top?
Did we?
Last one. I thought it was closer to 3, and I've heard speculation of 8 to 11 in this next run, with the amount of investors coming in, especially if the spot ETFs get approved and things like that. You're going to have these big capital investors coming in to crypto. That can boost the total market cap.
Yeah, I've seen that. Man, 11 would be insane. 10 would be insane. Yeah.
That's a 4x, dude.
So I mean,
if you think about Bitcoin going up, like if Bitcoin's 500 billion now, is Bitcoin going to go up 10x? If it went up 10x alone, it would be at the 5. But I don't know. I think each move gets weaker and weaker, right? So Ethereum and Bitcoin get less gains. Last time they went up, what about Bitcoin was almost 20x, I would say. So maybe it is 10x from the bottom, which is 150K. But I'm still thinking it might be less than that. But yeah, they're going to try hard to push it to 100K, I think.
Yeah, and I think the narrative for Ethereum flipping Bitcoin is very real. I mean, if the market in general, all these macro indicators and the conversations that we all hear and listen to and read about on the web, like, the JP Morgan and Fidelity and BlackRock and all these major institutions moving in and improving their existing positions, if it doesn't necessarily, maybe we do see this cycle where Bitcoin doesn't have dominance in the market. So maybe that could account for, I don't know, like you said, if we do a 10x from the 15.5 bottom, or we get to 100K. I know Sami is real adamant that everybody needs to be aware of this bull trap. I don't know. But regardless, like, I see a lot of that volume flowing into Pulsechain, and I could certainly be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't know why Pulsechain wouldn't be utilized in a massive way.
Ethereum, to me, I see like maybe Ethereum doesn't surpass Bitcoin anymore because they took too long to innovate, and we made Pulsechain arbitrums going. You've got optimism, so eventually there's a lot of competition on the layer 2 and other layer 1 scaling side, to where perhaps a lot of the users leave most of their efforts onto other chains, which is okay, right? If Ethereum just does the same thing Bitcoin does from now on, that's okay too, right? It doesn't have to surge past what Bitcoin does. They have a large community on Bitcoin, and they are obsessed. So who cares if it's better than Ethereum? We just want to see more growth from Pulsechain, right? So if Ethereum stagnates a little bit, if Pulsechain grows, that's optimal for me.
I feel like unless Ethereum comes out with their scaling solutions, people are going to get priced out of Ethereum on this next bull run.
Yeah. And what have they said before, JM? Do you recall? I think they were shooting for Q4 this year, right? But no new updates.
They were gonna fork Ethereum 4 years ago, and they finally did it this last year. So it's hard to tell. ZK roll up, all that stuff. If somebody comes up with another layer solution, that'll be helpful. But yeah, unless something like that happens, I mean, look at the last bull run. We had $4,600 Ethereum, and it cost you, $400 to do a simple swap. And nobody getting into crypto is gonna spend $400 on a swap.
No way. Yeah,
that's to become the rich man's trading ground.
That's it. That's what I was going to say. You're not spending $400 on a swap unless you've got at least, I don't know, 50, 60,000, something. Even then, it's, from a percentage perspective, it's way too high. So, if you got $1 million in your account, then that's not terrible, as long as you're not doing it every day. But yeah.
Well, and part of that is we're still focusing on the US dollar value of these things, and it really comes down to how much ETH did it cost you, and then what did you pay for that ETH? And so if you hold some ETH down at the bottom and you save it for your gas transactions later, that's going to help you out a lot.
Yeah. So having said all that, I'm assuming the majority of individuals in this space hold Pulse, and do you guys have kind of an idea of where you think Pulse is going to go? I certainly have a range in mind, but I'm curious what you guys think.
It's just like Hex. Originally nobody thought Hex was going to a penny, so it was unbelievable. But when we get people to sell the bigger bags, there's higher chances we go up. We just saw some major bags dumping here right now, so that's a good sign, in my opinion. The more we wash out, and maybe the washout's longer on Pulsechain, I don't know, but the more we get of that churning, the better. The one thing we do have, though, is those validating. The validators locked up a bunch early on. So the difference between Ethereum and Pulsechain is all you could do with Ethereum in the beginning was just sell, right? But now that we have this validating starting out on our network, you are going to have almost like the kingmakers to some extent, right? There's going to be people who already were wealthy on Hex and sacrifice a bunch for Pulse, and those guys, if they can hold on, there's a chance that they don't ever leave, right? They don't have to 10x, 20x, I'm out, like Bitcoin did. And you just wonder if, law of big numbers, can these people hold on and just be benevolent actors in OA, right? That's to me a big question, because it's you get trillions of Pulse that if it does remain in validators long term, that's perfectly fine, but you could have, if they start pulling out in large numbers, you could have some big price dips if you're trying to push on your way up even to a penny. So we'll see. It's kind of fun. The validators also have to wait to pull out. So the more that try to exit, I think the longer it'll probably take. But I think there's so few of the main players in that field that they probably think they're really dedicated to Pulsechain, and they probably think there's a big future like beyond 1 penny or something. So I don't think it's going to affect us very much. The yield is not 50% through on the value. It's probably more like 10, right? So it's sustainable, especially with the network volume going up, the fees or the transaction amount going up. Yeah, the fees go up. So we could do a higher capacity than ETH as well. A lot of people don't understand that, but the ETH is capped out at 1 million. It's about 1.2 million transactions a day. And I don't know how far we can go, but supposedly on testnet it went to like 6 million. So
Yeah, it was crazy on testnet. It's just absolutely wild. The amount of the volume that they push through. I'm curious. Hex is a way. Of course, it's in trying to speculate on where the market's going or where an individual asset like Pulse might go. Like you said, you have to consider the micro and the macro factors, and what you just said being one of the is kind of a micro factor in my mind. Maybe not, but thinking about this from a different perspective, from RH's perspective, right? RH has made this name for himself in that he wants to be the guy that's known for developing the best performing asset in crypto. And with Hex, like you say, it surprised a lot of people. Everybody was skeptical that it could reach a penny, and then it went up to 50 cents pretty quickly, and ran up and did that 10,000x, and the whole claim to fame in those moments was that it was outperforming BTC. But he made that same statement prior to releasing Pulsechain, and in regard to Pulsechain and the rest of the ecosystem. So, if Hex or Pulse or Pulsex or these primary assets in the ecosystem don't perform that well, in my mind, he can't hold on to that title any longer, and he loses a lot of maybe not, but it seems like he would be disappointed. Now, I don't have any insider information about Richard or his game theory that he has in mind, or the relative technical aspects to developing Hex or the rest of this ecosystem. But actually, I've lost my train of thought. I guess my question to you.
I know what Famous would say. Famous would say we gain another zero on Pulse first. So Pulse goes down, so we have a whole nother zero. And then it goes up 10,000x, and that's how we do it. That's what Famous would say. I would say we focus more on the 100x, and then this is like a multi-cycle victory for Pulse, right? Where it's like not a lot of people are going to hold on to their Pulse until 2029 when we hit 10,000x or so. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like a lot of things are possible with time because you get more and more people involved, and you have compounding effect of new projects, new investments, new people. So it's totally possible. I ran ETH up from $80 to 4,880, 4,800 or so for I was exiting my top points. I mean, if you can do it, you're going to be shocked if you do sell Pulse at $1 million or at $1, right? Because that's the 10,000x from the SAC, or maybe we say 10 cents is the 10,000x if we're below SAC, but we never quite hit that penny point. So it'd be something like 3. So it'd be like what would it be, 30 cents to 10,000x from the low?
10,000x from the all-time low is I've got it right here in front of me. Would be 30 cents. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the all-time low on the chart is 4027. Yeah. So
okay. So yeah, 27, 30 cents. I mean, that's those kind of numbers are definitely possible because you have to think about how many people have Pulse versus how many people are going to be using Pulse. If Pulsechain's successful, like every project needs Pulse. They're going to be locking up Pulse, all these different DeFi protocols, LPs. So Pulse gets spread out and doesn't get sold, basically. And there's no inflation, pretty much. I mean, it does create inflation, but then it burns it. So as long as we're kind of an active chain, it could potentially be deflationary. So you don't have that. Like a lot of the other chains, they have an inflation aspect initially, and we don't. So that's more bullish for us than the other chains when they started.
Right.
But we do have more competition than like Ethereum had. So there's more competition, but more users. So it's like it'll balance out.
I'm curious in looking at this from the perspective of the amount of top holders, right? Because we obviously, when we were sitting around sac price, there was that barrier of entry. So, depending on, individual finances, I mean, obviously some individuals had tens of billions of tokens or maybe even 100 billion tokens and fewer had billions of tokens. And then, we get to the point where the majority had whatever the majority is. I don't have that chart in front of me, but that number's come down. So, thinking about roughly a 3000x, right? 3333x from the all-time low on the chart of 4 zeros and a 27, that would put us at 10-cent pulse, right? Which would make 100 million pulse worth $10 million. And I don't, that's where this theory kind of falls apart for me in thinking that we could get to 10-cent pulse this cycle, because that would mean that a billion pulse would be worth $100 million. And I'm curious because I got into crypto really heavily last cycle, and I spent a bunch of money on Ethereum miners and was mining ETH, and I did pretty well throughout the cycle, but I got in kind of late. And I wasn't around when ETH had its ICO and, traded basically for $1 for about a year. Like I wasn't paying attention. So I'm curious, for those of you that were in, do you have an idea of how many wallets turned, I don't know, a relatively low amount of money into hundreds of millions of dollars? Was that a fairly large group? Or, I know this is all on chain. I can pull it up. I'm just curious if any of you know on the top, off the top of your head. You see where I'm going with that train of thought?
I do, but with ETH, they had the foundation, so half the 60 million polls for ETH went to the foundation, so that kind of removed a big chunk of it. But there's not many, I can tell you that much. There's even Vitalik, he's known to have hundreds of thousands of ETH, but not millions, right? So if you had 130 or 150 million supply and you don't even have a million yourself, how many other people, didn't have it?
Right.
So what I try to think about is that churning effect of the 10x's, right? Like 10x is so much money for most people that they're going to sell. So the people who last that have 100 million pulse is going to be rare. It might be some of the people who made it with Hex are going to be able to withstand the gains, you could say, without dumping. And that's fine. The more churn we get of the new shiny object and people give up their pulse, the new NFT, all of those things factor in to the point where there's not a lot of holders left that have large amounts and won't be tempted. What was I going to say? It's kind of like rotating out of 10x's over and over again until there's less and less that you have, and you're like, wait a second, what? I lost my pulse. Okay, and then it goes higher. So, I want to say the amount of money that was into the Pulsechain Sacrifice was about $200 million. There was Hex. There was 600 something million, 650 million or something. There was all different cryptos, but actual stablecoin dollar value, if you give up the Hex, because the Hex, a lot of it was sacrificed from people who almost, let's just say they're in profit 100x, right? So for them, they put in 1,000, they got 100,000. So that when they sacked it, can you really say that it's dollar bills? It wasn't new cash coming in, right? So if you try to think about 200 million, then we dropped from SAC, so we dropped down, so we're 100 million. Then you start to think about what you're talking about. Can 100 million go to a billion? Can 100 million go to 10 billion? In market cap value, it definitely can, right? We can definitely hit 10 billion on a user dollars invested market cap, which I think is a more fair way to look at the holders of Pulsechain and the potential for it to go up. It kind of makes it more like the real money, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a solid way of looking at things for sure. Yeah, and I agree with you. Hex is the way, about I've definitely thought about that too. I mean, like you said, as we go up 10x, I mean that's a lot of money. 100x is a lot of money. So that therein lies kind of the trick, in thinking about early Ethereum adopters, and how many were able to hold on to massive bags without selling those local tops. Because I mean, who's not going to be on cloud9 when they get 100x? And I don't know what the average investor in the system has then. I think it's relatively low, maybe $5,000 or less. The average person, the top 10% or the top 15% probably have. And I know all these metrics are out there. I'm just guessing, just kind of off the cuff. But I would guess that the majority of people don't have more than 20 or 30,000 in crypto, right? Do you think that's a fair statement? I mean, the average retailer, especially if they're new to crypto, they're not just gonna jump in unless they have a buddy, that's convinced them to do it. I mean, I know, my two best buds, it took me 2 months to get them onboarded into Pulse, and I had to text them and call them almost every day to get them to open a position, and those are relatively small positions. So obviously there are individuals out here that have tens of millions or millions in the ecosystem, but that's definitely not true for the majority. Looking at transactions and looking at wallets coming into certain assets that I have my eyes on, I mean, it looks like the majority have, a few $100s, few $1,000s in their account. Rarely, 1 out of 20 will have 50,000 or a couple 100,000 in their account. Those individuals are going to take profits. The smaller wallets are going to take profits. So maybe that's how we get to 10-cent Pulse or 17-cent Pulse in the first cycle if we make it. I said earlier I had a range, and the range is 2 to 3 cent Pulse for this cycle with a peak around 7.5 cents. But we'll see what happens.
The SEC come a little early, so the good thing too is that probably washed out some people, right?
Yeah, and that major seller, I mean, that drop was mostly attributed to one wallet, right?
Two main wallets. It was about 40 billion. It's about 40-ish billion, I think, Pulse. But
and I think they've
there's only so many out there. There's not too many wallets out there.
Yeah.
Most people sacked less than $1,000,
Yep.
So 100x, even if that person held on, it's 100 grand. So yeah, we definitely need money moving in, but I like to think about Hex, like how much liquid Hex is there, and if Hex can go 100x from here, it goes closer to the 80 cent to $1 range, and then does it pull things with it, right? Like there's just trading pairs. So if you can make Hex a certain price, it kind of follow. At least with Pulse, they're so tied together, it should bring everything up.